The November wind carried the scent of coming snow across the Montana Territory, cutting through the canvas sides of the stagecoach like a promise of hardship. Old Pete Garrison, 73 years, with more than half of them spent driving coaches across this unforgiving land, squinted at the two pieces of paper in his weathered hands, both yellowed from the same agency, both addressed to ranches in Twin Pines, both for a man with the initials R.C. He scratched his gray beard and muttered a curse his mother would have slapped him for, even at his age. North Point Ranch, Twin Pines Territory. Client R.C., Riverbend Ranch, Twin Pines Territory. Client R.C. The roads had washed out 3 days prior, forcing him to choose which ranch to visit first. In his 4 decades of delivering mail freight and the occasional desperate soul seeking a new life, he had never encountered identical orders from neighboring properties. The mail-order bride agency in Chicago surely would have noticed the duplication, wouldn't they? Unless some clerk had made an error, unless the same man owned both ranches, unless Pete's failing eyes had simply read the addresses wrong. He glanced back through the small window separating him from his single passenger. The woman sat with perfect posture, her traveling dress dark and practical, her gloved hands resting on a worn leather satchel. She stared out at the passing landscape with an intensity that made Pete uncomfortable. Most mail-order brides spent the journey crying, praying, or sleeping off the exhaustion of their desperation. This one studied the terrain like she was memorizing it, like she might need to find her way back alone. Lucy Ann Pemberton had been studying more than the landscape. For the past hour, she had been rereading a letter that should never have ended up in her possession. The mail-order bride agency in Chicago had many employees, and one of them owed a debt to the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, a debt paid in copied correspondence and whispered intelligence. The letter in Lucy's hands was written in controlled script, the kind produced by a man who had taught himself penmanship after the fact. It read, "Need wife quickly, must appear respectable for land deal, compensation generous, prefer someone without family ties. Discretion essential." In the margins, Lucy had made notes in pencil. Investigation subject, approach with caution. Known associates include local judge. 3 homesteaders disappeared within 12 miles of property in 18 months. She folded the letter carefully and returned it to her satchel, her mind already 3 moves ahead. The real bride, whoever she was supposed to be likely, had no idea what kind of man had sent for her. Lucy did. Reginald Cooper, land speculator. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, throwing. Lucy forward against the seat. She caught herself with practiced grace, her hand instinctively moving to the small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt, a habit born from 3 years as one of the few female operatives in the Pinkerton agency. Pete's voice carried through the canvas. "Twin Pines miss. End of the line." Lucy stepped down into the cold afternoon, her breath misting in the air. The town of Twin Pines was exactly what she had expected. One main street, false-fronted buildings that promised more than they delivered. A general store, a saloon, a church with peeling white paint, and a handful of houses scattered like afterthoughts. Population maybe 300 if you counted the surrounding ranches. 3 men stood near the hitching post outside the general store, their conversation dying the moment they saw her. A woman in a faded calico dress paused in sweeping the boardwalk, her broom stilling mid-stroke. News in a town like this traveled faster than the wind. "Miss Pemberton," Pete called down from his perch holding up a piece of paper, "says here you're headed to Riverbend Ranch, but the road's still washed out from the storm. Might be 3 days before it's passable. You could wait at the boarding house or—" He gestured toward a man loading supplies into a wagon 30 feet away. "That there's Roman Calhoun. His place North Point is just 4 miles west. He could give you a ride partway, seeing as how you'd be passing near enough." Lucy's trained eyes swept over Roman Calhoun in the space of 3 heartbeats. Tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of broad shoulders that came from years of physical labor rather than good fortune. Dark hair touched with premature gray at the temples. He moved with the efficient grace of someone who never wasted motion. His clothes were clean but worn, his boots repaired but well-maintained. A man who cared about his appearance but put function above fashion. Most importantly, he wore no wedding ring. The tan line on his left hand suggested he once had, but it had been gone long enough for the sun to even out the difference. This was not her target. Reginald Cooper was 42, according to his file, balding, and known to dress in expensive suits, even in ranch country. This man was younger, darker, harder around the edges. Before Lucy could respond, Pete made the decision for her. "Mr. Calhoun got a lady here bound for Riverbend, but road's no good. You headed back to North Point." Roman Calhoun turned his gray eyes, assessing Lucy with the same careful attention she had given him. For a moment something flickered across his face. Confusion, perhaps, or recognition of a situation spiraling beyond his control. "Riverbend?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. "Yes, sir." Pete continued, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "She's the bride old Cooper sent for. But seeing as the road's washed out and Riverbend's 3 miles past your place anyhow, I figured—" Roman's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Lucy saw the calculation in his eyes. The quick glance toward the men still watching from the general store, the nearly invisible straightening of his spine. "I see," Roman said slowly. Then, meeting Lucy's eyes directly, he added, "Welcome to Twin Pines, miss." "Pemberton," Lucy supplied. "Lucy Ann Pemberton." Pete, satisfied with his problem-solving, began unloading Lucy's single trunk, humming tunelessly. The watching townspeople had multiplied. Lucy counted 7 now, including a woman with bright copper hair who stood in the doorway of the general store with her arms crossed and her expression sharp with curiosity. Roman Calhoun stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Lucy could hear. "I need to be honest with you, Miss Pemberton. There seems to be some confusion. I'm not—" Lucy cut him off with equal quiet. "I understand there may be a misunderstanding, Mr. Calhoun. Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private." Their eyes locked. In that shared glance, an entire negotiation took place without words. He knew she understood the situation was wrong. She knew he was about to be exposed in front of his community. Both of them needed a way out that preserved their dignity. "Of course," Roman said, his voice returning to normal volume. He turned to Pete. "I'll see Miss Pemberton safely to her destination once the road's clear. No sense in her waiting at a boarding house when I've got space at North Point." Pete beamed, delighted to have solved everyone's problems. "Mighty kind of you, Mr. Calhoun, mighty kind indeed." As Roman loaded Lucy's trunk into his wagon, the copper-haired woman approached. She was perhaps 58, with warm brown skin and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Calhoun," she said, her accent carrying the musical lilt of northern Mexico, "you did not mention you were expecting company." "Mrs. Ortega," Roman replied, and Lucy heard genuine respect in his tone. "Unexpected circumstances. Miss Pemberton will be staying at North Point for a few days until the Riverbend road clears." Mrs. Ortega's gaze swept over Lucy with the precision of a military inspection. Lucy met it without flinching, recognizing a fellow survivor when she saw one. Women who had lived through hardship developed a particular kind of sight. "I see," Mrs. Ortega said. Then to Lucy directly, "I keep house for Mr. Calhoun 3 days a week. I will make sure the guest room is prepared properly. A woman alone needs certain considerations." It was both a welcome and a warning. Lucy nodded her understanding. The ride from town to North Point Ranch passed in thick silence. Roman kept his eyes on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins. Lucy studied the landscape with genuine professional interest. The Montana Territory spread out in all directions, vast and unforgiving. Rolling hills gave way to distant mountains, their peaks already white with early snow. This was land that demanded respect or exacted punishment. After 20 minutes, Roman finally spoke. "I apologize for the deception back there, Miss Pemberton. The truth is, I never sent for a mail-order bride. I don't know what Pete saw in those papers, but the entire town thinks you did," Lucy finished. "And correcting them now would be embarrassing for both of us." Roman glanced at her sidelong. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not easily surprised, Mr. Calhoun. Most women would be upset, finding themselves in the wrong place with the wrong man." Lucy allowed herself a small smile. "I didn't say I wasn't upset. I said I wasn't surprised. Life rarely goes according to plan. The question is what we do about it." Roman was quiet for a moment, the only sound the creak of the wagon and the steady clip of the horse's hooves. Then he said, "I can pay you for your time. Room and board for as long as you need until the road clears and you can get to wherever you're actually supposed to be going. If anyone asks, we'll say there was a misunderstanding with the agency. No shame in that." "That's generous," Lucy said carefully. "But I have to wonder, Mr. Calhoun, why you played along in the first place. A simple denial in town would have cleared up the confusion immediately." His hands tightened on the reins, the leather creaking. "Small towns have long memories, Miss Pemberton, and longer tongues. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than it appears." "I understand complicated," Lucy replied. They crested a small hill, and North Point Ranch came into view. Lucy had seen countless homesteads in her 3 years with the Pinkerton Agency. Most were barely more than Shack's optimistic claims on hostile land. North Point was different. The main house was solid timber construction, 2 stories with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The paint was faded, but intact. The barn was large and well-maintained, surrounded by corrals with straight fences, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, a root cellar with a new door. This was not the property of a desperate man. This was the work of someone who intended to stay. "You've built something good here," Lucy said, and meant it. "My father started it," Roman replied. "I've just tried not to ruin what he left me." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down, moving to help Lucy descend. She accepted his offered hand, noting the calluses and the strength in his grip. This was a man who worked his own land. Inside the house was clean and sparse. Functional furniture, no decorative touches, the kind of space occupied by someone who spent more time working than living. Roman showed her to a bedroom on the second floor, small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the eastern pasture. "I'll have Mrs. Ortega bring you fresh linens tomorrow," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "There's a wash basin and pitcher. Supper is at sundown, usually just stew or beans, nothing fancy." "I've had worse," Lucy assured him. Roman nodded, then hesitated. "Miss Pemberton, I meant what I said. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. You'll have your privacy, and I'll have mine. When the road clears, I'll personally escort you to Riverbend or back to town, whichever you prefer." "Understood," Lucy said. Then, because she needed to know, "Mr. Calhoun, may I ask you a question about your neighbor at Riverbend Ranch?" Something changed in Roman's expression. A hardening around the eyes, a tension in his jaw. "What about him?" "You've met him, Reginald Cooper." "Met him," Roman said flatly. "What's your interest?" Lucy made a split-second decision. Not the full truth, not yet, but enough to establish trust. "The man I was supposed to meet, the one who sent for a bride, I have reason to believe he might not be entirely honest about his circumstances. I wanted to be sure before I—" She let the sentence trail off meaningfully. Roman studied her with those careful gray eyes. "You're not a typical mail-order bride, are you, Miss Pemberton? Does such a thing exist, Mr. Calhoun?" He almost smiled, almost. "Fair point. To answer your question, yes, I've met Reg Cooper. And no, I wouldn't trust him with a sick dog, much less a woman looking for a fresh start. If you're having second thoughts about going to Riverbend, I'd say your instincts are good." "What makes you say that?" "Let's just say Cooper's had a run of bad luck when it comes to the people who work for him. They tend to disappear." Lucy felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. "Disappear. Leave suddenly according to him. Always in the middle of the night, always without notice. His last housekeeper vanished 8 months ago. Before that, a ranch hand. Before that—" Roman shook his head. "Point is, if you decide not to go to Riverbend, I won't blame you." Before Lucy could respond, the sound of a wagon approaching drew Roman to the window. His posture went rigid. "That's Mrs. Ortega," he said. "Earlier than usual." They went downstairs together. Mrs. Ortega bustled in, carrying a basket of what smelled like fresh bread, her sharp eyes immediately finding Lucy. "I thought you might need supper that did not come from a bachelor's pantry," she announced. Then to Roman, "And we need to talk privately." Roman glanced at Lucy. "If you'll excuse us, Miss Pemberton." Lucy nodded and retreated upstairs, but she left her door slightly ajar. Her Pinkerton training had taught her that the most valuable intelligence often came from conversations people thought were private. Mrs. Ortega's voice carried up the stairs, low but intense. "That girl is not what she seems, Roman. I have eyes. She moves wrong for a mail-order bride. She watches everything like she is memorizing it. And she has calluses on her right hand here." A pause, presumably as Mrs. Ortega indicated a location. That is where someone who writes constantly gets them. Secretaries, clerks, people who document things. I know, Roman's voice replied. I noticed. And you let her stay anyway. She's not going to Riverbend. That's enough for me. Why, what do you care if some desperate woman makes a bad choice? A longer pause. Then Roman said, because bad choices regarding Reg Cooper tend to be permanent. Lucy heard the scrape of a chair, footsteps pacing. Mrs. Ortega spoke again, quieter now. You are still looking for Daniel. Every day. Roman mihijo, it has been 6 months. If your brother were alive, I would know. I would feel it. And until I have proof otherwise, I'm going to keep looking. Roman's voice held a tremor Lucy hadn't heard before. Daniel wouldn't just leave Elena. Not without a word. Not with his wedding to Margaret Riley 2 weeks away. Something happened to him. You think Cooper? I think Daniel was surveying land near Riverbend when he disappeared. I think he found something he shouldn't have. And I think if I can prove it, Sheriff Riley will have to investigate instead of writing it off as cold feet. Lucy's mind raced, connecting dots. Daniel Calhoun. Disappeared 6 months ago, near Riverbend Ranch. The same time frame as several of the incidents in her Pinkerton file on Reginald Cooper. She moved away from the door, her heart pounding. This changed everything. Roman Calhoun wasn't just a random rancher who had accidentally provided her cover. He was investigating the same man she was for personal reasons that went deeper than justice. The question was, could she trust him? And more importantly, could she afford not to? Lucy spent the rest of the evening in her room, ostensibly resting from the journey, but actually reviewing everything she knew about the Cooper case. The Pinkerton agency had been hired by a coalition of homesteaders who suspected organized cattle rustling. Simple enough on the surface. But as Lucy had dug deeper, the pattern had emerged. 5 homesteaders had disappeared over the past 2 years. All men, all with small land claims adjacent to or near Riverbend Ranch. All had refused offers to sell their property to Reginald Cooper. Within months of each disappearance, the widows or families had sold the land for a fraction of its value, always to Cooper. The local sheriff had investigated each case and found nothing. No bodies, no evidence of foul play, just men who had apparently abandoned their claims and families in the middle of the night. Lucy didn't believe in that many coincidences. She had come to Twin Pines under the cover of being Cooper's mail-order bride because it was the only way to get close enough to observe him without suspicion. The plan had been to spend a few weeks at Riverbend, document his activities, identify his associates, and gather enough evidence for a warrant. But if Roman Calhoun's brother was another victim, that added both urgency and complication. The sun had set by the time Lucy descended for supper. She found Roman and Mrs. Ortega in the kitchen, a simple meal of venison stew and fresh bread laid out on a scarred wooden table. I hope you don't mind eating in the kitchen, Roman said. The dining room hasn't been used in years. This is fine, Lucy assured him, taking a seat. Mrs. Ortega served the stew with practiced efficiency, then surprised Lucy by sitting down to eat with them. No servant behavior here. Whatever Mrs. Ortega's official role, she was clearly more than hired help. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Roman spoke. Miss Pemberton, I realize this situation is unusual, and I understand if you want to leave as soon as possible. But I need to ask, is there anything you can tell me about Reginald Cooper? Anything the mail-order agency might have mentioned? Any red flags in his correspondence? Lucy set down her spoon carefully. This was the moment. She could continue the charade or she could take a calculated risk. Mr. Calhoun, before I answer that, I need to be honest with you about something. I'm not exactly what I appear to be. Mrs. Ortega's hand moved to her apron pocket where Lucy suspected she kept something more dangerous than a handkerchief. Roman's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Go on, he said. I'm a Pinkerton detective. I came to Twin Pines investigating Reginald Cooper for suspected involvement in organized cattle theft, and possibly worse. The mail-order bride cover was my way of getting close to him without arousing suspicion. The silence that followed was profound. Mrs. Ortega and Roman exchanged a long look, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, Roman said, A Pinkerton, here in Twin Pines. Yes. And you're telling me this because Because you're investigating the same man I am, and because I think we might be able to help each other." Roman leaned back in his chair, studying her. "My brother Daniel, he's in your files, isn't he? One of the missing homesteaders." "Not officially," Lucy admitted. "He wasn't a homesteader, he was a surveyor. But the timing and location match the pattern I've been tracking." "What pattern?" Lucy pulled a small notebook from her pocket, flipping to a page of careful notes. "In the past 2 years, 5 men with land claims near Riverbend Ranch have disappeared. Samuel Hewitt, March 1884, Thomas Brennan, July 1884, William Foster, November 1884, James Sullivan, February 1885, and most recently, Carl Peterson, May 1885. Every single one had been approached by Cooper with offers to buy their land. Every single one refused, and every single one vanished within 6 weeks of that refusal." Roman's face had gone pale. Daniel was surveying land for Carl Peterson. He was going to map the property lines, help Carl file the claim properly. He was excited about it, said it was good work helping homesteaders establish their rights. When did he disappear? June 10th. Margaret Riley, his fiancée, saw him the night before. He said he'd found something important, something that would change everything. He was going to the sheriff the next morning. Roman's voice cracked slightly. "He never made it." Lucy's mind was already racing ahead. What sheriff? Raymond Riley, Margaret's father. And what did the sheriff find when he investigated? Nothing. Said Daniel's horse came back without him. Searched the area, found no body, no signs of struggle. Declared it an abandoned claim, same as the others. But Daniel wasn't a homesteader. He had no claim to abandon. He was just doing survey work. And Sheriff Riley was satisfied with that explanation. Sheriff Riley is dealing with personal demons. Gambling debts, from what I hear. He did a cursory investigation and moved on. Said young men get scared of marriage and run away sometimes. Mrs. Ortega spoke for the first time since Lucy's revelation. But Daniel would never leave Margaret. That boy loved her since they were children. And he would never leave Roman. They were brothers in every way that matters. Lucy absorbed this, adding it to her mental file. A compromised sheriff, a pattern of disappearances, a surveyor who found something important right before vanishing. "Mr. Calhoun," she said carefully, "what if I told you I might be able to find out what happened to your brother? But I'd need your help to do it." "What kind of help?" "The kind where we continue this charade, where I stay here for a few days, long enough for me to do reconnaissance on Riverbend without Cooper knowing I'm not actually coming to marry him, where you provide cover and local knowledge and I provide investigative resources." Roman was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You'd be putting yourself in danger. Cooper's dangerous, and if he has the sheriff in his pocket, I'm trained for dangerous situations, mister." "Calhoun, this is what I do." "Roman," he corrected. "If we're going to be partners in this, you should call me Roman." Lucy extended her hand across the table. "Lucy?" His grip was firm, warm, and lasted a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Partners," he agreed. Mrs. Ortega watched this exchange with shrewd eyes. "You will both need to be very careful. This town is small. People notice everything. If you are seen together too much, if you ask too many questions, Cooper will know." "She's right," Lucy said. "We need to maintain the appearance that I'm simply waiting for the road to clear so I can get to Riverbend. That means I can't be seen actively investigating." "But I can," Roman said, understanding. "I've been asking questions about Daniel for months. No one would think twice about me continuing." They spent the next hour planning. Lucy would stay at North Point for 3 days, establishing her presence in town as Roman's accidental house guest. During that time, she would make one reconnaissance trip to Riverbend under the pretense of a walk, observe what she could, and return. Roman would continue his normal routine but would press his sources in town for any new information about Daniel or Cooper's activities. Mrs. Ortega would act as their eyes and ears, gathering gossip and watching for any signs that their cover was compromised. It was a simple plan. Too simple, Lucy thought, but sometimes simple was best. As the evening wore on and Mrs. Ortega prepared to leave, she pulled Lucy aside. "You care about finding this man's brother," the older woman said. It wasn't a question. "I care about justice," Lucy replied. "Justice is a cold word. It does not keep you warm at night. It does not make you risk your life for a stranger." Mrs. Ortega's eyes were sharp. Be careful, detective, not just of Cooper, but of your own heart. Roman Calhoun is a good man who has been hurt deeply. If you give him hope and then take it away—" "I won't make promises I can't keep," Lucy said firmly. "Good, because that man has already lost his brother. He cannot lose his faith in people, too." After Mrs. Ortega left, Lucy and Roman sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the cold Montana sky. The silence between them was different now, no longer awkward, but weighted with shared purpose. "Can I ask you something?" Roman said eventually. "Of course." "Why did you really tell me the truth? You could have maintained your cover, used me as an unwitting accomplice, and I never would have known." Lucy considered the question honestly. "Because you deserve to know what happened to your brother, and because I learned a long time ago that the best investigations are built on truth, not more lies. Even when the truth is dangerous, especially then." Roman was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Lucy, if we're going to do this, there's something else you should know. I'm not just looking for Daniel because he's my brother. I'm looking for him because I failed him once already. Our parents died when I was 22, and Daniel was 15. I became his guardian, his family. I was supposed to protect him, and when he needed me most, I didn't even know he was in danger." "You couldn't have known." "I should have." He was excited about that surveying job, but he was also nervous. Said something about the property lines didn't make sense. I told him he was overthinking it, told him to just do the work and get paid. I didn't listen. Roman's voice was rough with emotion. "So yes, I want to find out what happened to Daniel, but I also need to. I need to know if I could have prevented it." Lucy understood that kind of guilt. She carried her own version, the cases she'd solved too late, the victims she couldn't save. "We'll find the truth," she said quietly, "whatever it is." They sat in companionable silence until the cold drove them inside. Lucy lay awake long into the night, her mind too active for sleep. She thought about the investigation, about the pieces that didn't quite fit yet. She thought about Roman Calhoun and the quiet strength he carried, the grief he wore like a second skin. And she thought about tomorrow morning when she would take her first real look at Riverbend Ranch and the man who lived there. Reginald Cooper, land thief, possible murderer, a man who collected wives like other men collected livestock, using them until they were no longer useful and then discarding them. Lucy had dealt with dangerous men before, but this one felt different. This one was woven into the fabric of the community, protected by a compromised sheriff and a corrupt judge. This one had already taken too much from too many people. She would need to be careful, patient, precise. But she would also be relentless. Because somewhere out there 6 men were missing, and Lucy Ann Pemberton Pinkerton, detective, intended to find out why. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Lucy woke before sunrise, dressed in her plainest dress, and slipped out of the house while Roman was still doing his morning chores. She left a note saying she'd gone for a walk to clear her head. Not entirely a lie. The 3-mile walk to Riverbend Ranch took her 40 minutes, moving at a pace that wouldn't attract attention. She stayed off the main road, using the fence lines and natural terrain as cover. Her Pinkerton training included basic fieldcraft, and she used it now. Riverbend came into view just after full sunrise. It was larger than North Point, more ostentatious. A 2-story house with fresh white paint and green shutters, a barn that looked new with gleaming hardware, corrals filled with quality horses. Everything spoke of money and success. But Lucy had learned to look past the surface. She found a vantage point on a low hill about 200 yards from the main house, screened by a stand of pine trees. From there she could observe without being seen. For the next hour she watched and took mental notes. Reginald Cooper emerged at 7:15, immaculately dressed even at this early hour. He was exactly as described in the Pinkerton files. Mid-40s, average height, balding, with the kind of soft face that suggested he'd never done a day of manual labor. But Lucy noticed the way the ranch hands jumped when he called, the fearful deference in their movements. A woman appeared on the porch briefly. Tall, dark-haired, elegant, even in a simple day dress. She didn't interact with Cooper, simply stood watching him with an expression Lucy couldn't read from this distance. Then she retreated inside, moving like someone who had learned to make herself invisible. That would be Vivian, Lucy thought, described in local gossip as Cooper's sister, though Lucy's instincts said otherwise. At 8 o'clock a wagon arrived. 2 men climbed down, both wearing the kind of clothes that suggested they worked indoors rather than outdoors. They spoke with Cooper for several minutes, their body language suggesting a business transaction. Cooper pulled out a thick envelope and handed it over. The men left. Interesting. Lucy was about to retreat when she heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. She dropped low, pressing herself against the trunk of a large pine tree. The rider passed within 20 feet of her position, close enough for Lucy to see his face, young, maybe 30, with deputy star pinned to his vest. He rode straight to the Riverbend house and dismounted, calling for Cooper. Lucy couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see Cooper's welcoming gesture, the way he clasped the deputy's shoulder like an old friend. They went inside together, a sheriff's deputy making social calls at dawn, another piece of the puzzle. Lucy carefully made her way back to North Point, her mind cataloging everything she'd observed. When she arrived, she found Roman waiting on the porch, concern evident on his face. "I was about to come looking for you," he said. "I told you I was going for a walk. For 2 hours in this cold, I needed to see Riverbend for myself." Roman ushered her inside, where Mrs. Ortega was already preparing breakfast. The older woman took one look at Lucy's face and poured her a cup of hot coffee without comment. "What did you see?" Roman asked. Lucy told them everything. Cooper's routine. The mysterious visitors, the woman on the porch, the deputy's visit. "That would be Samuel Cross," Roman said grimly, "deputy to Sheriff Riley. He's young, ambitious, and from what I hear, significantly in debt to Cooper. Gambling losses." "So Cooper owns the deputy and possibly the sheriff," Lucy said. "That's how he stayed untouchable." "There's more," Mrs. Ortega said quietly. She was stirring something on the stove, her back to them, but her voice carried weight. "The woman you saw. That is Vivian Cooper. She came to Twin Pines 3 years ago. She never leaves the ranch. Some say she is Reginald's sister. Some say his wife. No one knows for certain because no one has spoken to her in more than a year." "What happened a year ago?" Lucy asked. "The last housekeeper disappeared, a woman named Sarah Yates. She and Vivian had become friends from what little anyone saw. They would sit on that porch together talking. Then one day, Sarah was simply gone. Reginald said she had left in the night, returned to St. Louis, but her trunk was still at the boarding house in town. Her wages were never collected." Lucy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "How many housekeepers has Cooper employed in the past 3 years?" Mrs. Ortega turned to face her. 4. All disappeared, all young women without family, like the men without land, people that no one would miss. The pattern was clear now, and it was worse than Lucy had imagined. Cooper wasn't just stealing land. He was eliminating witnesses and obstacles with systematic efficiency. Before Lucy could respond, they heard the sound of a horse approaching at speed. Roman moved to the window, his hand instinctively going to the rifle mounted above the door. "It's Eugene Birch, the postmaster." They went outside to meet him. Eugene was a thin man with nervous energy and thick spectacles that made his eyes look enormous. He pulled his horse to a stop and waved a yellow telegram. "Special delivery for North Point Ranch," he announced, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who lived for small-town drama. "Came in this morning. Figured it was important enough to bring out personal-like." Roman took the telegram, his jaw tightening as he read it. Then he handed it to Lucy without a word. The message was brief. "Heard the new Mrs. Calhoun arrived. Please join us for supper tomorrow evening at Riverbend. Neighborly welcome. Reg Cooper." Lucy felt her stomach drop. This was it. The trap was springing faster than she'd anticipated. "How did he know?" she asked quietly. Eugene, still sitting on his horse and clearly hoping to hear the response, supplied the answer. "Oh, whole town knows, miss. News like a mail-order bride arriving spreads fast. I might have mentioned it when I telegraphed the weather report to Billings yesterday. And then Mrs. Fletcher from the boarding house telegraphed her sister in Helena. And I suppose Reg Cooper keeps pretty good tabs on what happens in Twin Pines." Of course he did. Cooper would want to know immediately if a potential witness or complication arrived in his territory. "Well," Eugene continued when no one responded, "I'll just be on my way then. Let me know if you need a reply sent back, Mr. Calhoun. Always happy to help." After Eugene left, kicking up dust in his enthusiasm to spread more gossip, Roman and Lucy stood in silence, both understanding the implications. "He's testing you," Roman said. "He wants to see why his bride ended up at my ranch instead of his." "Or he knows exactly why, and this is him asserting control," Lucy countered. "Either way, I can't refuse the invitation. It would look suspicious. It could be dangerous. It's definitely dangerous. But it's also an opportunity. I'll be inside his house, able to observe, to ask questions." Mrs. Ortega joined them on the porch. "You cannot go alone." "The invitation is for both of us," Roman pointed out. "The new Mrs. Calhoun and her host. He's being clever. If Lucy goes alone, it's obvious she's not actually my bride. If we both go, we maintain the fiction." "Then we go together," Lucy said. "We stay for a polite amount of time, I gather what intelligence I can, and we leave. And if Cooper realizes you're not who you're pretending to be, then I improvise. It's what I'm trained for." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Lucy reviewed everything she knew about Cooper, creating a mental script of how a real mail-order bride might behave. Roman filled her in on the social dynamics of Twin Pines, who could be trusted and who was likely in Cooper's pocket. As the sun began to set, Mrs. Ortega returned with a basket of food and a piece of news that made Lucy's blood run cold. "Another mail-order bride arrived in town this afternoon," the older woman said quietly. "From the same agency, a young woman named Anna Schmidt. She is asking for directions to Riverbend Ranch." The three of them stared at each other, the implications sinking in. "The real bride," Lucy said. "The one Cooper actually sent for." "Who's staying at the boarding house tonight?" Roman added. "And will likely expect to go to Riverbend tomorrow." "The same day Cooper has invited you to supper," Mrs. Ortega finished. Lucy's mind raced through the possibilities. If Anna Schmidt showed up at Riverbend while Lucy was there claiming to be the mail-order bride, the entire cover would be blown. Cooper would know immediately that something was wrong. And a man like Reginald Cooper didn't forgive deception. "We have less than 24 hours, Lucy said quietly. "I need to warn Anna off or delay her somehow, or what?" Roman asked. Lucy met his eyes. "Or I need to move fast enough that by the time she arrives, I already have what I need." Mrs. Ortega shook her head. "This is too dangerous. Too many things that can go wrong." "It's also our best chance," Lucy countered. "Cooper is expecting me tomorrow. He'll be prepared to maintain his facade, to play the gentleman host. That's when he'll be most vulnerable to observation." Roman studied her face for a long moment. Then he said, "If we're doing this, we do it right. I'll go to the boarding house tonight, speak to Anna Schmidt. Tell her the road to Riverbend is still washed out, offer to let her stay at North Point until it clears. Buy us a few more days." "Cooper will wonder why his bride hasn't arrived," Lucy pointed out. "Let him wonder. We'll say you're the advance scout sent by the agency to verify the situation before they send the actual bride. It's thin, but it might hold for one evening." It was a desperate plan, built on improvisation and hope. But sometimes those were the only kind that worked. As full darkness fell, Lucy stood at her bedroom window looking out at the Montana night. Somewhere out there, Reginald Cooper was preparing for tomorrow's supper. Perhaps congratulating himself on controlling the situation. Perhaps planning his next move in whatever long game he was playing. He didn't know that Lucy Ann Pemberton was not a mail-order bride seeking a fresh start. He didn't know she was a Pinkerton detective with 3 years of training and a personal commitment to finding missing people. And he didn't know that sometimes the wrong bride in the wrong place could turn out to be exactly the right person at exactly the right time. Tomorrow she would walk into his house. She would smile and nod and play her role. And she would watch everything, remember everything, document everything, because somewhere in that house, or on that ranch, or in Cooper's carefully maintained facade, there was a crack, a weakness, a mistake. And Lucy intended to find it. Roman left for town just after dark, his wagon disappearing into the November cold. Lucy watched from the window until the lantern light faded completely, feeling the weight of what they were attempting settle onto her shoulders like snow accumulation. One wrong word tomorrow night, one detail out of place, one moment of Cooper seeing through the carefully constructed lie, and everything would collapse. She turned from the window to find Mrs. Ortega standing in the doorway, holding a dress Lucy had never seen before. "You cannot wear traveling clothes to supper at Riverbend," the older woman said, laying the garment across the bed. "This belonged to my daughter. She was about your size." The dress was beautiful. Deep blue wool with black piping at the collar and cuffs modest but elegant. The kind of dress a respectable mail-order bride might wear to meet her intended employer for the first time. "Your daughter," Lucy said carefully. "Does she live nearby?" Mrs. Ortega's hands smoothed the fabric with infinite care. "She died in the Revolution, 18 years old. She wanted to be a teacher. Instead, she learned to load rifles and dig graves." The older woman's voice carried no self-pity, only the flat acceptance of someone who had survived unbearable loss. "I keep her clothes because it reminds me that she lived, that she mattered." Lucy felt something twist in her chest. "Mrs. Ortega, I can't—" "You can. You will, because you are going into danger tomorrow, and you will wear armor." She met Lucy's eyes. "Even if that armor is just a dead girl's dress and the memory of why we fight." They stood in silence for a moment, two women who understood that survival sometimes required carrying the weight of those who didn't survive. "Why do you help, Roman?" Lucy asked quietly. "You could work anywhere, for anyone. Why stay here?" "Because when I came to this territory 7 years ago, I had nothing. No family, no references, no English worth speaking. Roman's father hired me anyway, taught me the language, treated me like a person, not property." Ortega's weathered hands never stopped moving, adjusting the dress, smoothing invisible wrinkles. "When his father died, Roman could have sent me away. Instead, he raised my pay, said the ranch needed me, but what he meant was that he needed someone who remembered his father, someone who knew grief. And now he's grieving his brother. Yes, and I will not let that grief destroy him. So if you are truly here to help Detective, then help. But if you are using him, using his pain to solve your case," Mrs. Ortega's eyes hardened, "then I will make sure you regret it. I have survived revolution and loss and poverty. One Pinkerton detective does not frighten me." Lucy nodded slowly. "I understand. And for what it's worth, I'm not using him. We're helping each other." "Good. Then tomorrow you will wear my daughter's dress, and you will come back alive, because I have buried enough children." Roman returned near midnight, his face grim. Lucy met him in the kitchen where Mrs. Ortega had kept coffee warm despite the hour. "Anna Schmidt agreed to stay here," Roman said, accepting the cup Mrs. Ortega poured. "She's frightened, barely speaks English, came all the way from Bavaria on the promise of a better life, and now she's stranded in a strange town with winter coming." "What did you tell her?" Lucy asked. "The truth, that the man who sent for her is dangerous, that she shouldn't go to Riverbend under any circumstances, that I'd help her find other arrangements or pay her passage back to New York if she wanted." He rubbed his face tiredly. "She cried for an hour, said she had no home to return to, that she'd burned every bridge to come here." Lucy felt the familiar weight of collateral damage. Every investigation created ripples that touched innocent lives. "She can stay at North Point as long as she needs," Lucy said. "After we expose Cooper, she'll be free to make her own choices without his shadow hanging over her." "If we expose him," Roman corrected. "We're building a case on disappeared people and circumstantial evidence. Without bodies, without witnesses willing to testify, Cooper walks free." "Then we find the bodies," Lucy said quietly, "or we find someone brave enough to talk. Tomorrow night is just reconnaissance. I'm looking for something, anything that gives us leverage." They sat in silence, drinking coffee that had gone bitter from sitting too long. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like restless spirits. "Roman," Lucy said eventually, "what was your brother really like?" He looked surprised by the question. Most people avoided speaking of the dead as if silence could somehow lessen the pain. "Daniel was—" Roman paused, searching for words. "He was the opposite of me in every way that mattered. I'm practical. He was idealistic. I see obstacles. He saw possibilities. Our father used to joke that God made 2 sons so we'd balance each other out." "You loved him." "Love him. Present tense. Because until I see a body, until I know for certain he's still my brother who needs help." Roman's jaw tightened. "That's why I keep searching. Not because I think I'll find him alive, but because giving up feels like killing him myself." Lucy understood that kind of desperate hope. She'd seen it in families of missing people throughout her career. The refusal to accept the probable truth because acceptance meant admitting you'd failed to save someone you loved. "Tomorrow night," she said firmly, "we're going to find answers, whatever they are." The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Lucy spent the morning reviewing her cover story until every detail felt natural. Roman worked the ranch with unusual intensity, burning off nervous energy through physical labor. Mrs. Ortega prepared food. No one ate her own way of managing anxiety. Anna Schmidt arrived in the early afternoon, brought by Roman in his wagon. She was younger than Lucy expected, maybe 23, with blonde hair braided so tightly it looked painful. Her eyes were red from crying, her hands never stopped moving, and she flinched at sudden sounds. Lucy's detective instincts cataloged the behavior immediately. This was not a woman fleeing poverty. This was a woman fleeing something specific and terrifying. "Miss Schmidt," Lucy said gently in German, one of 4 languages the Pinkerton agency had required her to learn. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." Anna's head snapped up, shock evident on her face. "You speak German. Enough to help. Why don't you tell me why you really came to Montana?" The story that emerged over the next hour confirmed Lucy's suspicions. Anna had not answered a mail-order bride advertisement out of romance or even desperation. She'd been sold. Her father, deep in debt to men who made their living through intimidation, had accepted payment from an American agent. Anna's consent had been irrelevant. "They said I would work as a housekeeper," Anna whispered. "That after 2 years my father's debt would be forgiven and I could choose to stay or return home. They said it was legal, proper." "It's not legal," Lucy said quietly. "It's trafficking. And the man who arranged it is the same man I'm investigating." Anna's face went even paler. "Then I have made you all targets. If he knows I told you, he won't know. You're going to stay here safe while we deal with Cooper. And then we're going to make sure your father's debts are erased and you can go home if you want, or stay here on your own terms." "How can you promise such things?" "Because I'm very good at my job." And by the time the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Lucy was dressed in Mrs. Ortega's daughter's blue dress, her hair pinned in a style that suggested respectability without vanity. She looked like exactly what she was pretending to be, a woman of limited means, seeking security through practical arrangement. Roman emerged from his room wearing what were clearly his best clothes, a dark suit, white shirt, string tie. He looked uncomfortable, like a wolf forced into sheep's clothing. "You clean up well, Mr. Calhoun," Lucy observed. "I feel like I'm attending a funeral." "In a way we are. We're mourning the pretense of civility while dining with a murderer." Mrs. Ortega blessed them both in Spanish, her hand making the sign of the cross over their heads. Anna watched from the kitchen doorway, her face tight with worry. "If you're not back by midnight," Mrs. Ortega said, "I'm sending Deputy Cross." "Deputy Cross is probably in Cooper's pocket," Roman replied. "Then I'm coming myself, with this." She pulled a very illegal sawed-off shotgun from beneath her apron. "Revolution taught me many things. One is that evil men understand only one language." The ride to Riverbend took 30 minutes, following the road that had supposedly been too washed out for travel. It was rough but passable, which meant Cooper had been lying about the road conditions from the start. He'd wanted Anna isolated, dependent, without options. "Remember," Lucy said as they approached the ranch, "I'm a mail-order bride who got nervous and went to the wrong ranch. You're the kind neighbor helping me correct my mistake." We're both slightly embarrassed by the confusion, but grateful for Cooper's understanding. "And if he asks why you're just now showing up at his door, I'll say I needed a few days to gather my courage. That I've never been west before and everything frightened me. Men like Cooper enjoy fear. It makes them feel powerful." Roman's hands tightened on the reins. "I don't like you walking into this." "I know, but it's necessary." Riverbend Ranch looked even more impressive up close. The house gleamed white in the fading light, every window glowing with expensive lamp oil. The barn and outbuildings were immaculate, the corrals filled with horses that probably cost more than most homesteaders made in a year. This was the facade Cooper showed the world: success, respectability. The American dream realized through hard work and clever business. But Lucy had learned to look past facades, and what she saw here was a monument built on stolen land and disappeared lives. Cooper himself emerged before they'd even stopped the wagon. He was exactly as Lucy had observed from a distance, mid-40s, balding, soft-featured, wearing a suit that cost more than most men earned in 3 months. His smile was practiced warm, designed to put visitors at ease. "Mr. Calhoun?" He called out, his voice carrying the hearty bonhomie of a natural politician. "And you must be Miss Pemberton. Welcome, welcome. I was beginning to worry about you." Lucy allowed Roman to help her down from the wagon, playing the role of a woman unaccustomed to such courtesy. "I apologize for the confusion, Mr. Cooper. I'm afraid there was a misunderstanding with the delivery. When I realized I'd gone to the wrong ranch, I was too mortified to correct the mistake immediately." "Perfectly understandable," Cooper assured her, taking her hand with practiced gentility. "These things happen. The important thing is you're here now. Please come in. My sister is eager to meet you." "Sister." The lie slid off his tongue as easily as breathing. Inside the house was as opulent as the exterior promised. Thick carpets, wallpaper with elaborate patterns, furniture that had been shipped from back east at considerable expense. Every surface proclaimed wealth and taste. But Lucy noticed other things too. The windows had locks on the inside, unusual for a ranch house. The walls were thick, sound-dampened. The hallways were arranged so that you couldn't see from one room to another, creating pockets of isolation. This was a house designed for control. Vivian Cooper appeared at the top of the stairs, moving with the careful grace of someone who had learned to make herself unobtrusive. She was perhaps 35, tall and slender, with dark hair pulled back severely. Her dress was expensive but conservative, her jewelry minimal. But her eyes held the kind of awareness that came from constant vigilance. "Vivian," Cooper said with false warmth, "come meet our guests, Miss Lucy Pemberton and our neighbor, Mr. Roman Calhoun." Vivian descended the stairs, her hand trailing along the banister. When she reached the bottom, she offered Lucy a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Pemberton, how unexpected." The word choice was deliberate, not lovely, not wonderful, unexpected. Lucy felt a chill of recognition. This woman knew. Somehow Vivian Cooper knew that Lucy was not what she appeared to be. The question was whether she would expose the lie or allow it to continue. Dinner was served in a formal dining room that could have seated 20 but held only 4. A Mexican woman, silent and efficient, brought course after course. Venison roasted to perfection. Fresh vegetables somehow preserved through early winter. Wine that must have cost a fortune to ship. Cooper dominated the conversation with practiced ease, asking Lucy carefully calculated questions about her journey, her background, her expectations. Lucy had prepared for this offering a story built on half-truths and strategic omissions. "My family was in Boston," she said, which was true. Her parents had lived there before they died. But after certain disappointments, I decided a fresh start was necessary. "Disappointments in love?" Cooper asked with false sympathy. "Disappointments in trust. I learned that not all men are what they present themselves to be." Cooper's smile never wavered, but Lucy saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of a kindred deceiver. Across the table, Roman ate in silence, playing his role of uncomfortable chaperone. But Lucy could feel his attention, the way he tracked every word, every gesture. Vivian said almost nothing, pushing food around her plate with mechanical precision. But twice Lucy caught her staring with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. After the main course, Cooper suggested the men retire to his study for brandy, while the ladies became acquainted. It was a transparent attempt to separate Lucy from Roman, to observe her behavior without protection. Actually, Vivian said, her first voluntary contribution to the evening, "I'd prefer if we all moved to the parlor. I find these old customs of separating by gender quite tedious." Cooper's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, dear sister, whatever you prefer." But it wasn't preference. It was intervention. Vivian was protecting Lucy, though. Why remained unclear. In the parlor, Judge Horace Blackburn waited, rising from a wing-backed chair as they entered. He was exactly as Lucy's research had described, distinguished, gray-haired, wearing his authority like armor. "Ah, Cooper," the judge said warmly, "you didn't mention you were entertaining tonight." "Unexpected pleasure," Cooper replied smoothly. Judge Blackburn, may I present Miss Lucy Pemberton and Mr. Roman Calhoun. Miss Pemberton has recently arrived from Boston. The judge's eyes sharpened with interest. Boston. Lovely city. What part? Lucy had anticipated this. Powerful men like to test a probe to establish dominance through superior knowledge. Beacon Hill originally, she said, naming a neighborhood wealthy enough to be impressive but large enough to be vague. Though my family's circumstances changed significantly in recent years. I see. And you've come west seeking better fortune. I've come west seeking honest work and peace of mind. Fortune would be a bonus. Blackburn chuckled, the sound oily and false. Well said, my dear, well said. Cooper, you've chosen well. Intelligence is such a rare commodity. Roman, still playing his role, interjected carefully. Judge, might I ask your opinion on the land survey dispute near Copper Creek? I've been trying to help resolve it, but the legal questions are beyond me. It was a masterful deflection, turning attention away from Lucy while simultaneously gathering intelligence. If the judge was involved in Cooper's land scheme's discussion of surveys, might reveal something useful. But Vivian moved first. Miss Pemberton, she said quietly, would you care to see the house? I'm sure the men's discussion of property law will bore you terribly. Cooper looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't, without appearing controlling. Judge Blackburn was already launching into explanation of territorial surveying regulations. Roman caught Lucy's eye, a silent question. She nodded slightly. This was an opportunity. Vivian led Lucy upstairs, moving with purpose. They passed several closed doors before Vivian finally stopped at one near the end of the hallway. She opened it to reveal a sitting room expensively furnished, but with a lived-in quality the rest of the house lacked. This is my private space, Vivian said, closing the door behind them. Then, without preamble, you're not a mail-order bride. Lucy's training kicked in immediately. Assess, adapt, respond. I'm not sure what you mean. Please don't insult my intelligence. I've lived in this house for 3 years. I know what desperate women look like. I know how they move, how they talk, how they hold themselves. Vivian crossed to the window, staring out at the darkening landscape. You move like someone who's never been desperate a day in her life. You watch everything and everyone like you're documenting evidence. And most tellingly, you're not afraid of my brother. Every woman who comes to this house is afraid. But you're just calculating. Lucy made a split-second decision. Vivian had kept this observation to herself so far, which meant she had her own agenda. If you know I'm not a bride, why haven't you told Cooper? Because anyone investigating Reginald is an ally, not an enemy. Vivian turned from the window, and Lucy saw the exhaustion in her face, the bone-deep weariness of someone who had been surviving rather than living. What are you really? Law enforcement of Pinkerton. Someone's vengeful sister, Pinkerton, investigating suspected cattle theft and the disappearances of multiple homesteaders. Vivian laughed, but the sound held no humor. Cattle theft. Is that what they think this is about? What is it about? Control. Empire. Reginald doesn't just want land. He wants to own this entire territory. Every ranch, every claim, every resource, and anyone who stands in his way disappears. Are you his sister? I'm his wife, married 3 years ago under circumstances I had no power to refuse. My father owed Reginald money. This was how the debt was repaid. Vivian's voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone who had told this story to themselves so many times it no longer carried weight. I'm not the first. There was a Sarah before me. She's buried on the north pasture, though Reginald tells people she returned to St. Louis. Lucy felt something cold settle in her stomach. How many wives? 3 before me. How many homesteaders? At least 8 that I know of. How many ranch hands, housekeepers, drifters? I stopped counting. Vivian opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a leather-bound journal. But I documented everything. Names, dates, locations where bodies might be found. 3 years of watching and waiting for someone brave enough to act. She held out the journal. Lucy took it with hands that trembled slightly despite her training. Why now? Lucy asked. You could have gone to authorities before? What authorities? Sheriff Riley is deep in Reginald's pocket through gambling debts. Judge Blackburn receives regular payments to look the other way. Deputy Cross is more ambitious than moral. Who exactly would I tell? Vivian's composure cracked slightly. I stayed because leaving meant dying. Reginald made that very clear. And I documented everything because I refused to let him win completely. If I was going to be trapped, I'd at least make sure evidence existed. This journal. You understand what it is? You're a witness, a victim. You'd have to testify. I understand, and I'm ready. But I need your help to survive long enough to make it to a courtroom. Before Lucy could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Heavy. Male. Moving with purpose. Vivian moved with surprising speed, taking the journal from Lucy and concealing it in her dress. Act like I'm showing you the house. Smile. Laugh if you can manage it. The door opened without a knock. Cooper stood in the doorway, his expression pleasant but his eyes sharp. Ladies keeping secrets. Just girl talk, Vivian said smoothly. Miss Pemberton was admiring the curtains. They're from Paris, you know. I do know. I paid for them. Cooper's smile was fixed, artificial. Miss Pemberton, I hate to cut the evening short, but a business matter has come up that requires my immediate attention. Perhaps we could arrange another visit soon, under less hurried circumstances. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. Lucy and Roman were back in the wagon 10 minutes later, rolling away from Riverbend under a sky heavy with unborn snow. Neither spoke until the lights of the ranch disappeared behind them. Did you learn anything useful? Roman finally asked. Lucy thought about the journal hidden in Vivian's dress, about the casual mention of bodies buried on the north pasture, about 3 years of documented crimes waiting for someone with the courage to act. Yes, she said quietly. I learned we're going to need more than evidence. We're going to need a miracle. They arrived back at North Point to find Mrs. Ortega and Anna waiting anxiously in the kitchen. Coffee had been kept warm. Bread had been sliced. The rituals of comfort offered through the only means available. Lucy told them everything. Vivian's revelation, the journal, the buried wives, the systematic elimination of obstacles. Roman's face grew progressively grimmer. Mrs. Ortega's hands clenched into fists, and Anna wept quietly. So we have a witness, Roman said when Lucy finished. That's something. A witness trapped in her abuser's house, watched constantly, unable to escape. That's also something. Lucy rubbed her face tiredly. We need to get Vivian out, and we need that journal. How? Mrs. Ortega demanded. You cannot simply walk up and take her. Cooper has men. He has weapons. He has the law on his side. Then we don't do it during the day. We do it at night. We plan it carefully. And we do it soon before Cooper realizes Vivian talked to me. That's suicide, Roman said flatly. It's the job. This is what I do, Roman. I find people who need help, and I help them, even when it's dangerous, especially when it's dangerous. They argued for another hour, voices rising and falling with frustration and fear. But eventually, a plan emerged. Rough, risky, built on hope and desperation in equal measure. The town's Thanksgiving celebration was in 3 days. Everyone would attend, including Cooper and his household, except Vivian, who never left the ranch. That would be the moment. While the town was distracted, while Cooper's men were fewer, they would break into Riverbend, get the journal, and extract Vivian. It was, Lucy admitted privately, a terrible plan, but it was the only plan they had. The next 2 days passed in tense preparation. Roman taught Lucy the layout of his ranch, the locations of weapons, the fastest routes to town. Mrs. Ortega gathered supplies, preparing for the possibility they'd need to hide Vivian or run. Anna surprisingly proved useful with needlework altering clothes to create disguises. But underneath the activity, tension built like pressure before a storm. On the second evening, while Roman was checking the barn, Lucy found herself alone with Mrs. Ortega in the kitchen. You care for him, the older woman said without preamble. Lucy didn't bother denying it. It's not relevant. Everything is relevant when you might die tomorrow. Tell me, detective, if you survive this, what happens? You return to Chicago, back to your cases and your Pinkerton life. That's the plan. Plans change. I had a plan once. Revolution was supposed to be brief. My family was supposed to survive. We were supposed to have a future. Mrs. Ortega's hands never stopped moving, kneading dough with methodical violence. But revolution consumed everything, and when I survived, I had to decide what to do with a life I never expected to have. What did you decide? that survival means nothing if you don't build something with it. I could have stayed bitter, stayed broken. Instead, I found purpose here, found family. Sometimes the life you get is not the life you planned, detective, but it can still be a good life. Lucy had no answer to that. She'd spent 3 years solving other people's problems, finding other people's missing loved ones, bringing other people's criminals to justice. She'd never stopped to ask what she wanted for herself. She was spared from further introspection by Margaret Riley's unexpected arrival. Daniel's former fiancée came just after sunset, her face tight with determination. She was 25, blonde, wearing the practical clothes of a schoolteacher who had walked 4 miles rather than waste money on a wagon. "Mr. Calhoun," she said, when Roman emerged from the barn, "I need to speak with you. About Daniel." They gathered in the kitchen again, the only warm room in the house. Margaret accepted coffee with shaking hands and launched into her story without preamble. "I've been going through Daniel's things. I couldn't before. It hurt too much. But after you started asking questions around town, after people started talking about Cooper again, I forced myself." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "I found this hidden in his surveying equipment." He'd drawn a map. The map showed the area around Riverbend Ranch in meticulous detail. But what caught Lucy's attention were the marks. Small X's scattered across what appeared to be Cooper's north pasture, 6 of them. "Daniel was documenting something," Margaret said. "I think he found where Cooper buried people. And I think Cooper killed him for it." Roman stared at the map, his expression unreadable. "This is evidence. Real evidence. We need to take this to the sheriff." "Sheriff Riley won't act," Lucy said. "He's compromised, but federal marshals will. If we can recover that journal from Vivian and connect it to this map, we have enough for a warrant." "Then we need to move faster," Roman said. "Tomorrow night, the town dance. We get the journal, we get Vivian, and we present everything to federal authorities before Cooper can retaliate." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," Roman said immediately. "Daniel was my fiancé. If he died investigating Cooper, then I have every right to help finish what he started." "Margaret, it's too dangerous." "I'm a school teacher, not a fool. I can ride, I can shoot. And more importantly, I know the back trails around Riverbend. Daniel showed me. He was so proud of his surveying work. He wanted to share it with me." Her voice cracked. "Please, let me do this. Let me help bring his murderer to justice." Lucy saw Roman's resistance crumble. She understood. This was about more than justice now. It was about honoring the dead by finishing their work. "All right," Roman said quietly. "But you follow orders, both of you. No heroics. We get in, we get what we need, we get out." The night before the town Thanksgiving dance, Lucy couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window watching clouds build in the western sky. Snow was coming. She could feel it in the air, that particular heaviness that preceded a Montana blizzard. Footsteps on the stairs drew her attention. Roman appeared in the hallway, moving quietly so as not to wake the others. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much to think about." They sat together on the top step, shoulders almost touching in the narrow space. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Roman said, "Lucy, if something goes wrong tomorrow, if we don't make it out, I need you to know something. Don't say goodbye like we're already dead. I'm not. I'm saying thank you. For caring about Daniel, for not treating him like just another case file, for giving me hope that maybe we'll finally get answers." Lucy turned to look at him, seeing the exhaustion and determination etched into his face. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand. "We're going to survive this, Roman. We're going to get justice for Daniel and for everyone else Cooper hurt. And then we're going to figure out what comes next." "What do you want to come next?" It was the question Mrs. Ortega had asked, but from Roman it felt heavier, more significant. "I don't know," Lucy admitted. "For 3 years I've lived case to case, never staying anywhere long enough to build connections, never letting anyone get close enough to matter. It felt safer that way. And now I'm sitting on a staircase with a rancher I barely know planning to break into a murderer's house, and for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Roman's hand tightened on hers. "Lucy, "We should get some sleep," she said, standing before the moment could become something neither was ready for. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." But as she lay in bed later listening to the wind test the windows, Lucy allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where cases ended and life began. Where temporary partnerships became permanent. Where a Pinkerton detective and a Montana rancher found something neither had been looking for. It was a dangerous thought. Hope was always dangerous, but Lucy had learned that sometimes the most dangerous things were also the most necessary. The day of the town dance dawned gray and cold. By afternoon, the first snowflakes were falling fat and lazy, deceiving in their gentleness. Mrs. Ortega watched the sky with worried eyes. "Storm is coming, big one. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow." "Then we'd better move fast," Lucy said. They arrived in town just as the celebration began. The church hall had been decorated with pine boughs and ribbon tables laden with food prepared by the entire community. A fiddle player tuned his instrument in the corner. Children ran shrieking between adult legs. It was wholesome, warm, everything a frontier community aspired to be. And somewhere in the crowd Reginald Cooper played the role of respectable citizen, never suspecting that three people planned to rob him of his secrets. Lucy wore the blue dress again, playing the part of Roman's guest. They mingled, smiled, accepted congratulations on their supposed engagement that had somehow become town fact despite neither of them claiming it. Lucy noticed Sheriff Riley watching them with bloodshot eyes, Judge Blackburn holding court near the food tables, Deputy Cross laughing too loudly with a group of young ranch hands. Cooper arrived fashionably late, dressed in his finest, greeting everyone like a benevolent patron. But Vivian, as expected, was absent. "She's unwell," Cooper told anyone who asked. "Women's troubles, you understand." Code to Lucy knew, for "I'm keeping her locked up because she's a liability." They waited until the dancing began in earnest, until attention was focused on the fiddle music and the swirl of skirts. Then, one by one, they slipped away. Roman first claiming he needed to check on something at the ranch, Margaret 10 minutes later saying she had lesson plans to prepare. Lucy last mentioning fatigue from travel. They met at a copse of trees a mile from town, where Roman had hidden horses and supplies. The snow was falling harder now, beginning to accumulate. "We have maybe 4 hours," Roman said. "If we're not back by then, people will notice." Margaret tied her skirts up for easier riding. Lucy checked the small pistol concealed in her pocket. Roman loaded his rifle with practiced efficiency. 3 people, 1 dangerous plan. Everything balanced on the edge of a knife. They rode for Riverbend through thickening snow, following trails that skirted the main roads. Twice they had to dismount and lead the horses through difficult terrain. The cold bit through their clothes, making fingers clumsy and faces numb. What they didn't know was that they were being followed. Anna Schmidt, racked with guilt for bringing danger to people who had shown her only kindness, had watched them prepare from her window at North Point. She'd seen the grim determination in their faces, heard fragments of their whispered plans. When they rode out, she waited only 5 minutes before saddling the remaining horse. Her English was poor, but her resolve was iron-forged. She would not hide while others fought the monster who had tried to claim her. She followed at a distance, using the tracks in fresh snow as her guide, her heart pounding with fear and purpose in equal measure. Finally, Riverbend appeared through the white curtain of snow. The house showed lights in only a few windows. Cooper's men would be at the dance or in the bunkhouse, numbers reduced by the holiday. "Remember," Lucy whispered as they tied the horses in a sheltered ravine. "We're looking for Vivian first, the journal second. No unnecessary risks. If something goes wrong, we scatter and meet back at North Point." But as they crept toward the house, moving from shadow to shadow, Lucy felt the weight of too many unknowns. How many men had Cooper left behind? Where exactly was Vivian? Would she even cooperate, or had she changed her mind about escaping? Roman pointed to a side door, servant's entrance. He'd been here before, knew the layout from social calls back when Cooper first arrived in Twin Pines. They moved in single file, Roman first, then Lucy, then Margaret, bringing up the rear. The door was locked, but old. Roman worked at it with a thin piece of metal face, tight with concentration. After what felt like hours, but was probably seconds, something clicked. They were in. The interior was dark, lit only by a single lamp in the front hallway. Lucy's eyes adjusted slowly, picking out furniture shapes, doorways, the stairs leading to the second floor. Everything felt too quiet, too empty, too much like a trap. "Something's wrong," she breathed, but Roman was already moving forward. Then a voice from above, calm and expected. "Looking for me." They looked up to see Vivian standing at the top of the stairs, still dressed as if for company, but holding a carpetbag. She descended quickly, efficiently, like someone who had been waiting. "I heard the town was having a celebration," Vivian said quietly. "I knew you'd come tonight, so I prepared." "Where are Cooper's men?" Roman asked. "Two in the bunkhouse, both deep into a bottle of whiskey. I left them. The rest are in town. We have time, but not much." Lucy felt relief flood through her. "The journal." Vivian patted the carpetbag. "Everything. 3 years of documentation, names, dates, locations. It's all here." "Then let's move," Roman urged. But as they turned toward the door, light flooded the hallway. The front door opened, and Reginald Cooper stepped inside, flanked by 2 men with rifles. "Going somewhere, darling?" he asked Vivian, his voice pleasant. Then to Lucy and Roman, "And you've brought friends. How delightful." They'd been betrayed. Someone had told Cooper they were coming. The question was who, and more importantly, how they were going to survive the next 10 minutes. Time crystallized into individual heartbeats. Lucy's hand moved toward the pistol concealed in her dress, calculating angles and odds. 3 of them, 3 of Cooper's men, all armed. Roman's rifle was slung across his back, useless in close quarters. Margaret stood frozen, her face white with terror she was trying desperately to hide. Cooper's smile never wavered, pleasant and poisonous as oleander. Now, no sudden movements. My men have orders to shoot if anyone reaches for a weapon, and I'd hate for Mrs. Calhoun's lovely dress to be ruined with blood. Blue is such a difficult stain to remove." "How did you know?" Vivian asked quietly, her voice empty of surprise. She'd been expecting this. Lucy realized with sinking certainty that Vivian had known it was a trap all along. "My dear sister," Cooper said, the false affection dripping like honey laced with arsenic. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you preparing to leave? 3 years you've lived in this house. 3 years I've watched you document my affairs like some demented clerk. Did you believe I was unaware?" "You let me," Vivian breathed, understanding dawning. "All this time. You let me think I was gathering evidence when really I was letting you incriminate yourself as an accomplice. Every entry in that journal, every notation, every date proves you knew about my business dealings and said nothing. Makes you just as guilty in the eyes of the law. Conspiracy, I believe they call it." Cooper's eyes shifted to Lucy. "And you, the Pinkerton detective playing dress-up as a mail-order bride. Did you think I wouldn't investigate when a woman showed up at my neighbor's ranch instead of mine? I have resources, telegraph access, friends in Chicago who owe me favors." Lucy's mind raced, calculating exits that didn't exist. The front door was blocked. The side door they'd entered through had 2 more men approaching, visible through the window. They were cornered in a hallway with no cover and no advantages. Roman's voice cut through the tension, steady as stone. "Let them go, Cooper. Your business is with me. You killed my brother. These women have nothing to do with it." "On the contrary, Miss Pemberton has everything to do with it. She's been investigating me for months, gathering evidence, building a case. And Miss Riley—" Cooper's gaze shifted to Margaret, and Lucy saw recognition flicker across his face. "You're Daniel's little schoolteacher, aren't you? The one who kept waiting for him to come home. Tell me, did you ever wonder what happened to that surveying map he was so proud of?" Margaret's intake of breath was audible. "You killed him. You killed Daniel because he found your graves." Such an ugly word. "Murder. I prefer to think of it as property management. Your beloved Daniel made the mistake of discovering where I'd buried previous obstacles. He was going to take that information to the sheriff. I couldn't allow that." Cooper gestured to one of his men. "Carter, secure their weapons. Be thorough." The man named Carter moved forward, middle-aged, with dead eyes and scarred knuckles. Lucy recognized the type. Someone who'd done violence so often, it no longer registered as exceptional. He took Roman's rifle first, then moved to pat down Lucy with hands that lingered inappropriately. "Touch her again, and you'll lose those fingers," Roman said, his voice carrying a promise of violence that made Carter step back. Cooper laughed. Still playing the gentleman rancher Calhoun. Even now, how admirably stupid. Carter, finish your work. I'll deal with Mr. Calhoun's objections personally." As Carter reached for Lucy's pistol, the sound of shattering glass exploded from somewhere deeper in the house. All heads turned toward the noise. In that split second of distraction, Lucy made her choice. She drove her elbow into Carter's throat, following through with a knee to his groin. He dropped, gasping. She had his pistol before he hit the ground, swinging it toward Cooper in one fluid motion. But Cooper had moved too, pulling Vivian in front of him as a human shield, his own weapon pressed against her temple. "Impressive, Miss Pemberton. The Pinkertons train their women well. But unless you want my sister's brains decorating the wallpaper, I suggest you lower that weapon." Lucy's hand didn't waver. She'd been in standoffs before, knew how to read body language, calculate odds. Pattern. So why should I believe lowering pattern? So why should I believe lowering this gun will save her life? Because alive, she's useful leverage. Dead, she's just another mess to clean up. And I have standards about messes. Cooper's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance detective. Movement behind Cooper caught Lucy's eye. Anna Schmidt, the terrified German girl they'd left at North Point, emerged from the shadows holding a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. Her face was set with determination born of desperation. She swung. The poker connected with the skull of the second armed man with a sound like a watermelon splitting. He dropped instantly. Cooper spun instinctively, releasing Vivian to aim at this new threat. Roman moved. Fast. Faster than Lucy would have thought possible for a man his size. He crashed into Cooper, both of them tumbling to the floor. The gun discharged deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling where the bullet struck. "Run!" Roman shouted, grappling with Cooper. "All of you run!" But Lucy had been trained for chaos. While others froze, she acted. She grabbed Vivian's arm, pulling the woman toward the side door. Margaret followed, half-dragging Anna, who stood frozen in shock at what she'd done. Behind them, the sound of fighting, grunts, impact, breaking furniture. They burst through the side door into the night. The storm had intensified, snow falling so thickly it created a white curtain that reduced visibility to mere feet. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing breath and stinging exposed skin. "The horses," Lucy gasped, trying to orient herself. But the landscape had transformed. Familiar landmarks disappeared under accumulating snow. The ravine where they'd tied the mounts could be anywhere. "This way," Vivian said, her voice suddenly strong, decisive. She'd lived here 3 years, knew this land in ways they never could. She led them through the blinding white, moving with purpose. Behind them, men's voices shouted. Lanterns appeared, bobbing points of light in the darkness. Cooper's remaining men rallying. They found the horses by providence or luck, the animals stamping nervously in the shelter of the ravine. Lucy helped Vivian, mount pushed Anna up behind Margaret. But Roman was still in that house. "Go," Lucy told them. "Ride for North Point. Barricade yourselves inside. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Roman." "I'm not leaving you," Vivian said. "You're the witness. That journal in your bag is the evidence. If you die, everything dies with you. Go." Vivian hesitated one more agonizing second, then kicked her horse into motion. Margaret followed Anna, clinging to her waist. They disappeared into the white chaos, hoofbeats muffled by accumulating snow. Lucy turned back toward the house. She'd left a partner behind. The Pinkerton agency had rules about that. You never abandoned your partner. Even when your partner wasn't officially your partner. Even when staying meant probable death. She made it 3 steps before strong hands grabbed her from behind, spinning her around. Not Cooper's men, Roman. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye, his coat torn but alive. "We have to go," he panted. "Now, Cooper's men are fanning out." "Did you kill him?" "No. Knocked him unconscious. Tied him with curtain cords. Won't hold long." Roman pulled her toward their remaining horse. "We can't outrun them in this storm. We need shelter. Need to regroup." "Where?" "I know a place. Daniel showed me. A line shack maybe 2 miles north. We can hole up there until the storm passes or help arrives." They rode double the horse, struggling through drifts that grew deeper with each passing minute. The cold was brutal, invasive, the kind that killed through increments. Lucy's fingers went numb inside her gloves. Her face felt frozen ice crystals forming on her eyelashes. Time became meaningless. They could have ridden for 10 minutes or an hour. The world condensed to the next struggling step, the next breath of air that seared lungs, the warmth of Roman's body pressed against her back as they rode. When the shack appeared, it seemed miraculous. A small structure, barely more than 4 walls, and a roof, but solid. Roman practically fell off the horse getting the door open. They stumbled inside, dragging their mount in with them. The space was tiny, meant to shelter one cowboy during storms, but it had 4 walls and blessed relief from the wind. Roman worked with numbed hands to get a fire started in the small iron stove, while Lucy tended the horse, rubbing it down with old sacking to prevent the animal from freezing. Within 20 minutes, they had heat. Meager, but present. Enough to sustain life. They sat close to the stove shoulders, touching, neither speaking, as sensation slowly returned to frozen extremities. The pain of thawing was intense, needle stabs of returning circulation. Finally, Roman spoke. "Anna, how did she get to Riverbend?" "We left her at North Point. She must have followed us. Probably felt guilty about bringing danger to everyone." Lucy flexed her fingers, watching color return. "She saved our lives. That poker swing gave us the opening we needed. We left a man for dead. You left a criminal for dead. There's a difference." Roman was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I found something in Cooper's study when we were fighting. Papers, deeds, all from the men who disappeared, all signed over to Cooper, dated after they vanished. Forgeries. Obvious ones once you look closely. The signatures don't match, but Cooper had them notarized by Judge Blackburn anyway, created legal ownership of stolen land." Roman pulled the folded documents from inside his coat. "I grabbed what I could before I ran. Daniel's claim papers were there too. Signed over to Cooper 3 days after he disappeared." Lucy took the papers, studying them even in the dim firelight. This was evidence. Real, tangible, provable evidence. Combined with Vivian's journal, they had enough to bury Cooper legally, if they survived to present it. "How long until the storm passes?" Lucy asked. "Hours? Maybe days. Montana storms can last a week." Roman fed another piece of wood into the stove. "But Cooper's men won't wait. They'll come looking as soon as there's a break in the weather. Then we use the time we have. Plan our next move. Figure out how to get this evidence to federal authorities without going through local law enforcement." They spent the next several hours creating contingencies and backup plans. If separated, they'd each independently ride for Billings, where a federal marshal was stationed. If captured, they'd hidden copies of the most damaging documents in different locations. If one died, the other would finish the mission. It was cold logic detective thinking, the kind of planning that acknowledged death as a possibility to be prepared for rather than feared. Somewhere in those hours, exhaustion caught up with them. Lucy woke to find herself slumped against Roman's shoulder, his arm around her, both of them having fallen asleep sitting up. The fire had burned low. Outside, the wind had quieted. Dawn light filtered through cracks in the walls, pale and fragile. Roman stirred, awareness returning slowly. For a moment, neither moved, prolonging the simple human warmth of contact before reality intruded. "Storm's passing," he said quietly. "We should move." "Yes." But neither did. Not yet. Because this moment felt suspended, existing outside normal time. Two people who'd faced death together, survived through luck and determination, now facing an uncertain future where every choice carried weight. "Lucy," Roman said, and his voice held something she couldn't quite identify. "After this is over, after Cooper's arrested and the evidence is presented and justice is served, what then?" "I don't know. The Pinkerton Agency. They'll have other cases for you, other towns, other investigations." "Probably." "So you'll leave, move on to the next assignment." It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement of reality. Lucy's life was motion. She never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. That was the job. That was how she survived. But sitting in this cold shack, watching dawnlight strengthen, feeling the solid presence of a man who'd risked everything to find his brother, Lucy found herself questioning those certainties. "Roman, The sound of horses approaching cut off whatever she might have said. Multiple animals moving through snow with purpose. Roman moved to the small window, peering out carefully. 4 riders, coming from the direction of Riverbend. Cooper's men. Can't tell yet, but we need to assume yes. They had perhaps 5 minutes before the riders reached the shack. Not enough time to saddle their horse and run. Not enough time to create defenses, just enough time to make one choice: fight or surrender. Lucy checked her pistol. 5 rounds remaining. Roman had his rifle, maybe 20 rounds, against 4 men with unknown weaponry. "We hold here," Roman said. "Make them come to us. The doorway's a bottleneck. They can't rush us all at once. Unless they burn us out. Then we go down fighting." Lucy found herself smiling despite the circumstances. "You know, 3 days ago, you were a lonely rancher who accidentally got saddled with a fake bride. Now you're planning last stands. 3 days ago, I was a lonely rancher living with ghosts. Now I'm alive. Terrified, but alive. That's your fault, detective." The riders were closer now. Lucy could hear voices calling out, though not the words. She and Roman positioned themselves on either side of the door, weapons ready. Then a familiar voice cut through the morning air. "Roman, Lucy. If you're in there, it's Sheriff Riley. I'm here to help." Lucy and Roman exchanged glances. A trap or genuine aid? "How do we know it's really you?" Roman called back. "Because I'm here with my daughter, you stubborn fool, and Mrs. Ortega. And Deputy Cross, who just realized he's been working for a murderer and wants to make it right." Roman cracked the door open slightly. Sure enough, Sheriff Riley sat on his horse looking older and more worn than Lucy remembered. Margaret was beside him and Mrs. Ortega, and a young man wearing a deputy's star who looked like he'd been crying. They opened the door fully. The riders dismounted Sheriff Riley, moving stiffly like a man whose bones hurt from more than just cold. "Someone want to tell me what in the hell is happening?" Riley demanded. "My daughter shows up at my house last night in the middle of a blizzard with 2 women and a wild story about Reginald Cooper being a mass murderer. Then Mrs. Ortega appears with documents and a journal. Then Deputy Cross here confesses he's been taking bribes. And somewhere in all of this, my daughter tells me, you've been investigating Daniel Calhoun's disappearance this whole time, and I've been too drunk and compromised to listen." Roman looked at his former almost father-in-law. "Daniel's dead, murdered by Cooper. We have proof." Something broke in Riley's face. Not surprise. Confirmation of what he'd suspected, but been too cowardly to confront. "Where's the body?" "Buried somewhere on Riverbend's north pasture, along with at least 5 others." Riley sat down heavily on a stump outside the shack, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. Margaret knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Papa, you can make this right. We can make this right, but we have to act now before Cooper regroups." Deputy Cross spoke up, his voice shaking. "Sheriff, I need to confess. I've been taking money from Cooper for 2 years, looking the other way, not investigating complaints. I thought it was just business. I didn't know about the murders. I swear I didn't know." "But you suspected," Lucy said quietly. "And you did nothing." "Yes, ma'am. And I'll face justice for that. But right now Cooper's back at Riverbend with maybe 3 men. He's wounded, angry, and dangerous. If we're going to arrest him, we need to do it fast before he runs or calls in more help." Riley looked up, his bloodshot eyes meeting Roman's. "Daniel? He was a good kid. I'm the one who suggested he take that surveying job. Told him it would be good experience, good money. I sent him to his death." "No," Roman said firmly. "Cooper killed him. You can't take responsibility for a murderer's actions, but you can take responsibility for bringing him to justice now." Riley stood slowly, squaring his shoulders. Some decision made, some internal line crossed. "All right, here's what we're going to do. Deputy Cross, you're going to ride to the telegraph office. You're going to wire the federal marshal in Billings and request immediate assistance. Give him everything. The murders, the land theft, Judge Blackburn's involvement. Everything." "Yes, sir." "Mrs. Ortega, you're going to ride back to North Point with Margaret and those women. You're going to secure that journal and those documents in a safe place. If anything happens to us, you take them directly to federal authorities. Understand?" "I understand, Sheriff." "Roman, Lucy, you're with me. We're going to Riverbend. We're going to arrest Reginald Cooper for murder, conspiracy, land theft, and anything else we can make stick. And we're going to do it by the book, legal and proper, so there's no chance of this falling apart in court." Lucy felt something shift in the air. This was law reasserting itself, order pushing back against chaos. Not perfect, not complete, but present. They rode for Riverbend as the morning sun burned through the last of the storm clouds. The world was white and clean and brutally cold. Their breath misted. The horses struggled through drifts that reached past their knees in places, but they moved forward. As they approached the ranch, Lucy noted the lack of activity. No smoke from the chimneys, no movement in the corrals. The place felt abandoned, or as if it were holding its breath. "Something's wrong," Roman murmured. They dismounted 100 yards out, approaching on foot with weapons drawn. The front door stood open, swinging slightly in the wind. Snow had drifted inside, creating a white carpet across the expensive rugs. Inside they found chaos, furniture overturned, broken glass, blood on the floor, not enough to be fatal, but enough to tell a story of violence. And in the study papers scattered everywhere, drawers pulled out and emptied. The safe standing open and empty. Cooper was gone. So were his men. And so were all the original documents that might have served as evidence. "He ran," Riley said flatly. "Took what he could and ran." But Lucy was studying the scene with trained eyes. Something didn't fit. The blood pattern was wrong. The scattered papers suggested a search, not a flight. And the safe had been opened with the combination not forced. "He didn't run," she said slowly. "He was taken." "What?" Lucy pointed to the floor. Boot prints in the blood, too many different sizes to all belong to Cooper's men. 5, maybe 6 different people were here. There was a confrontation. Someone bled significantly. And then they all left together. Roman found something on the desk. A telegraph slip partially burned but readable. "It's to Judge Blackburn, sent yesterday evening. Says, situation compromised. Initiate contingency. Dispose of all evidence. Meet at designated location." Sheriff Riley's face went pale. "Judge Blackburn, he's in this deeper than we thought." "He's not just in it," Lucy said, understanding clicking into place. "He's the architect. Cooper was just the enforcement. Blackburn provided the legal framework, made the forgeries official, protected Cooper through the courts. But now that we've exposed the operation, Blackburn is cleaning up loose ends, which means Cooper is probably already dead. Blackburn can't afford witnesses who might turn state's evidence to save themselves." They searched the rest of the house, finding more evidence of hasty departure, but no bodies. In Vivian's room, they found her extensive documentation of the ranch's daily operations. In Cooper's bedroom, they found a locked box containing correspondence that detailed years of coordinated crime between Cooper and the judge. It was treasure trove of evidence. But without Cooper alive to testify, without Judge Blackburn in custody, it was just paper. "Where would Blackburn take him?" Riley asked. Roman thought for a moment. "The judge has a hunting cabin up in the high country, maybe 15 miles from here. Remote, private. Perfect place to dispose of evidence." "Or dispose of a partner who's become a liability," Lucy added. They rode hard, pushing horses that were already exhausted. The terrain grew progressively rougher, climbing into foothills where snow lay even deeper. Twice they had to dismount and lead the animals through passages too narrow or steep for riding. Lucy's fingers had long since gone numb again. Her face felt like frozen leather. But she pushed forward, driven by the same stubborn determination that had made her a successful Pinkerton agent. The case wasn't closed until it was closed. They found the cabin just after midday. Smoke rose from the chimney. 3 horses stood in a makeshift corral. And sitting on the porch looking for all the world like he didn't have a care was Judge Horace Blackburn. He looked up as they approached, showing no surprise or concern. "Sheriff Riley, Mr. Calhoun, Miss Pemberton, I wondered when you'd arrive." They dismounted, spreading out instinctively to cover different angles. Riley's hand rested on his sidearm. "Where's Cooper, Judge?" "Inside, dead. Shot himself about an hour ago." "Tragic end for a troubled man." "I don't believe you," Blackburn shrugged. "Believe what you wish. You'll find a suicide note in his handwriting confessing to all manner of crimes. Very convenient, really. Saves the territory the expense of a trial." Lucy moved toward the cabin door, but Blackburn raised a hand. "I wouldn't go in there, my dear. It's quite messy. Head wounds tend to be. Besides, what would you gain Cooper dead by suicide? Case closed. The homesteader families can have their justice. The territory can move on. Everyone wins." "Except the truth," Roman said quietly. "The truth." Blackburn laughed, and for the first time Lucy saw the mask slip, saw the calculation beneath the distinguished exterior. The truth is that weak men build nothing. They squat on land they can't defend, make claims they can't maintain, and cry injustice when stronger men take what they're too feeble to keep. Cooper and we built something in this territory. Order, structure, a foundation for real civilization. And yes, some people had to be removed, but that's progress. That's how the world actually works. That's murder, Riley said. And theft, and corruption. Prove it. Oh, you have papers, documents, Vivian's little journal. But who's going to testify Cooper's dead? His men will claim they knew nothing. And Blackburn smiled, I'm a respected judge with 20 years on the bench. Who do you think a jury will believe? It was the moment Lucy had been dreading, the point where law and justice diverged, where having evidence wasn't enough without someone willing to stand witness. But then a voice came from inside the cabin, weak but audible. I'll testify. Reginald Cooper appeared in the doorway, very much alive, holding a bloody cloth to his side. His face was gray with pain, but his eyes were clear and filled with a rage that transcended self-preservation. You shot me, he said to Blackburn. Your partner of 5 years shot me like a dog and planned to claim I killed myself. But you missed anything vital, you pompous fool. And now I'm going to tell them everything. Blackburn's composure finally cracked. His hand moved toward his coat, but Roman was faster. The rifle came up steady and sure. Don't. For a long moment, they held that tableau. Blackburn weighing his chances, Riley with his hand on his gun, Lucy watching every micro-expression for hints of which way the judge would break, Cooper leaning against the doorframe, bleeding but alive. Finally, Blackburn's shoulders sagged. I want a lawyer. I'm invoking my right to legal representation. You'll get one, Riley said. After I arrest you for attempted murder, conspiracy, theft, and corruption. Judge Horace Blackburn, you're under arrest. The ride back to Twin Pines took most of the day. Cooper, wounded but stable, rode double with Lucy. Blackburn, hands bound, rode with Riley. Roman brought up the rear rifle across his saddle, watching for any sign of trouble. They stopped once to rest the horses and re-bandage Cooper's wound. The bullet had passed through his side, missing organs, but causing significant blood loss. He was weak, fading in and out of consciousness, but each time he woke, he talked. About the murders, about the forgeries, about how Judge Blackburn had approached him 5 years ago with a plan to consolidate land ownership through systematic elimination of smallholders, about specific deaths, specific burials, specific crimes. Lucy documented everything in her notebook, writing with numb fingers that could barely hold the pencil. This was evidence, testimony, the kind that would stand up in federal court. When they finally reached town, the sun was setting. The Thanksgiving celebration had long since ended, but people emerged from their homes at the sight of the sheriff returning with prisoners. Word spread like wildfire. Mrs. Ortega met them at the sheriff's office, her face tight with worry that eased only slightly when she saw them alive. The women are safe at North Point. The journal is secure, and the federal marshal has been contacted. He's riding from Billings now, should be here by tomorrow. Good, Riley said. He locked Blackburn in one cell, had the town doctor tend to Cooper in another. Then he turned to Lucy and Roman. You two look dead on your feet. Go home. Sleep. We'll need detailed statements tomorrow, but for now, get warm and rest. Lucy wanted to argue to stay and ensure proper procedure, but exhaustion was winning. She and Roman rode to North Point through the gathering darkness, neither speaking, both too tired for words. At the ranch, they found Anna had made soup. Vivian had organized the evidence into careful stacks. Margaret had written out a chronological timeline of Daniel's disappearance. 3 women, all damaged by Cooper in different ways, all contributing to his downfall. They ate, they warmed themselves, and slowly, in bits and pieces, they told the full story. So it's over, Anna said quietly. Cooper will stand trial. The judge, too. Yes, Lucy confirmed. It's over. But even as she said it, she felt the weight of what came next. The case was solved. The criminals caught. Justice would be served. Her job was done, which meant her reason for staying was gone. She excused herself early, climbing the stairs to the small bedroom that had been hers for less than a week, but somehow felt like home. She stood at the window, looking out at stars emerging in the clearing sky, and felt something crack inside her chest. A knock at the door. Roman's voice. Can I come in? Yes. He entered still in his coat, snow melting in his hair. For a moment he just stood there, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The federal marshal arrives tomorrow, he said. You'll give your statement, file your report. The Pinkerton agency will probably want you back in Chicago. Probably. And you'll go. It wasn't a question, but Lucy heard the hope underneath. The unspoken plea for her to say no, to stay, to choose this place and these people over duty and profession. Roman, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. A detective. Someone who solves cases and moves on. Then don't be anything other than what you are. But Lucy, being a detective doesn't mean you can't have a home. Doesn't mean you can't have people who matter. The Pinkertons need regional offices. Montana Territory is growing. Crimes don't stop just because one case closes. You're asking me to stay. I'm asking you to consider that maybe the wrong bride ended up being exactly the right person, not for Cooper, for me, for this place, for yourself. Lucy felt tears prick her eyes, which was ridiculous. She didn't cry. She was professional, controlled someone who dealt in facts and evidence, not emotions. But standing in this room looking at a man who'd risked everything to find his brother, who'd fought beside her and trusted her, and offered her something she'd never thought she wanted, Lucy found her certainties crumbling. I need to think, she whispered. I need time. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Lucy sat on the bed, feeling the weight of choice settle onto her shoulders. Stay or go. Build something or keep moving. Risk vulnerability or maintain safety. She didn't sleep that night. Just sat watching stars wheel across the sky, turning possibilities over in her mind like stones, examining each from every angle. The federal marshal arrived the next day. Thomas Grant, 45 years old, competent, and no nonsense. He took statements from everyone, examined the evidence, interviewed Cooper at length. By evening, he had enough to file formal federal charges against both Cooper and Judge Blackburn. This is solid work, Miss Pemberton, he told Lucy. The Pinkerton agency should be proud. You've broken up a criminal enterprise that's been operating unchecked for years. Thank you, Marshal. I'll be recommending you for commendation. And if you're ever interested in working for federal law enforcement rather than private, let me know. We could use people like you. It was professional validation, the kind Lucy had spent 3 years earning. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it just felt empty. That evening, the community gathered at the church, not for celebration, but for remembrance. Sheriff Riley stood before them, looking older, but somehow more solid than he had in years. We've lost people, he said simply. Daniel Calhoun, Samuel Hewitt, Thomas Brennan, William Foster, James Sullivan, Carl Peterson, Sarah Yates. Others we may never know about. They were taken from us by evil masquerading as progress, but they won't be forgotten. We'll find their remains. We'll give them proper burials. We'll make sure their families know the truth. Roman stood when Riley finished, his voice steady, despite the emotion behind it. My brother Daniel died doing what he believed was right, trying to help a homesteader secure his claim, trying to expose corruption. He was 25 years old, engaged to be married, full of hope for the future. Reginald Cooper took all of that from him, from us. But Daniel's death won't be meaningless. Because of what he discovered, justice is finally possible. Thank you, Daniel. We'll make sure your sacrifice mattered. Margaret wept openly. Mrs. Ortega held her, this woman who'd lost her own children to violence, offering comfort born of shared grief. Anna sat with Vivian, 2 women whose lives had been forever altered by Cooper's machinations, finding solace in survival. After the service, people lingered, speaking in quiet voices, processing trauma that would take years to fully heal. Lucy stood apart, watching the community come together in shared mourning and shared resolve. Roman found her on the church steps, looking out at the town that had been the center of so much pain. Have you decided? He asked quietly. The Pinkerton agency wants me back in Chicago. They have other cases, other investigations that need experienced agents. I know. But they also said they'd consider opening a regional office here. If I could demonstrate there was enough work to justify it, enough crime that needs investigating, enough people who need help. Roman's breath caught. And I told them I'd think about it. do a feasibility study, spend a few months determining if Montana Territory could support a permanent Pinkerton presence. Lucy turned to look at him. It might not work. I might conclude there's not enough business. Or I might decide I'm not suited for permanent residence. Or you might decide you don't actually want a Pinkerton detective as a permanent fixture in your life. Or, Roman said, and his voice held something Lucy had never heard before, something warm and hopeful and terrifying. It might work perfectly. You might find enough cases to justify staying. You might discover you like having a home base. And I might discover that having a partner in every sense of the word is exactly what I've been missing. Roman Calhoun, are you proposing? No. I'm negotiating, same as we've been doing since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach. We negotiate, we compromise, we figure out how to make this work. But this time, we're negotiating a future instead of just surviving a present. Lucy felt something unlock inside her chest. Permission, perhaps, to want something beyond the next case, to build instead of just solve, to stay instead of always leaving. All right, she said, let's negotiate. Epilogue. 6 months later, Lucy stood in the office of Twin Pines' first permanent Pinkerton branch reviewing case files. The space was small but functional, located above the general store with a view of the main street. A sign outside read, L.A. Pemberton Detective. Investigations, missing persons, discreet inquiries. Business had been steady. Cattle theft cases, missing person investigations, one memorable incident involving a con man selling fake mining claims. Montana Territory, it turned out, had plenty of crime to justify a permanent detective presence. She heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see Roman covered in dust from working the spring planting. He carried a basket Mrs. Ortega had packed because the woman had decided Lucy would starve to death if left to feed herself. Lunch delivery, he announced. You're supposed to be planting the North 40. North 40 will still be there after I eat. How's the Peterson case going? Closed this morning. Found their missing cattle 3 counties over hidden in a box canyon. Local sheriff is making arrests now. They ate together this partnership they'd built over winter months. Not marriage, not yet. Though Roman had asked twice, and Lucy had said maybe both times. But partnership in every way that mattered. He ran his ranch. She ran her cases. They shared meals and conversation and the quiet comfort of 2 people who'd chosen each other deliberately with full knowledge of what they were getting into. Vivian had gone east, taking a position with the Pinkerton Agency in Chicago. She'd discovered she had a talent for investigation, for uncovering secrets and exposing lies. Her letters came regularly filled with details of cases and tentative plans for someday returning west, someday facing her demons on her own terms. Anna had stayed becoming Margaret's assistant at the school and discovering a gift for teaching children. She'd sent word to her father that his debts were forgiven, but she would not be returning to Bavaria. Her life was here now, built on her own terms. Margaret had finally allowed herself to grieve Daniel properly, and in that grief had found the strength to move forward. She and Deputy Cross, who'd resigned from the sheriff's office to work an honest job at the lumber mill, had been seen walking together after church. Something tentative. Something that might become something more. Sheriff Riley had stopped drinking. It hadn't been easy or perfect, but he'd done it attending meetings at the church, accepting accountability for his failures, working to rebuild trust. He'd organized the recovery of remains from Riverbend's north pasture, ensuring each victim was identified and given proper burial. Penance, he called it. Making amends for looking away when he should have seen. Cooper was in federal prison, awaiting trial. Judge Blackburn had been convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 30 years. Both men had tried to make deals to trade testimony for lighter sentences, but the evidence had been too strong. Justice, imperfect and slow, had nevertheless arrived. "Penny for your thoughts," Roman said, watching Lucy's distant expression. "Just thinking about how none of this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to arrive at Riverbend Ranch, gather evidence, file a report, and move on. Instead, I went to the wrong place and found what? Found that being in the wrong place can sometimes mean being exactly where you need to be." Roman smiled, that slow expression she'd come to love, the one that transformed his entire face. "So does this mean you're finally going to say yes? To what? To making this permanent? to being not just partners, but married. I was going to say family, but married works too. Lucy set down her coffee cup, meeting his eyes across the small table. 3 months ago, she would have said no. Would have explained that she wasn't the marrying kind, that her work required freedom and flexibility, that she'd never pictured herself as anyone's wife. But 3 months ago, she hadn't fully understood that freedom and commitment weren't opposites, that you could build a life and still take cases, that having a home to return to made leaving easier, not harder. "Ask me again in a month," she said. "After I close the Henderson case and finish the feasibility report for the agency. Ask me when I'm not juggling 6 investigations and a territorial expansion proposal." "Will your answer be different in a month?" Lucy looked at this man who'd ridden into danger beside her, who'd trusted her when trust was dangerous, who'd offered her partnership, not possession. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small box she'd been carrying for 2 weeks, purchased from the jeweler in Billings during her last trip. Inside was a simple gold band sized for a rancher's calloused hand. "I believe in evidence-based decisions," she said, "and the evidence shows that we work, so I don't need a month. My answer is yes." Roman stared at the ring, then at her, something breaking open in his expression. "Lucy Ann Pemberton, did you just propose to me? I'm a Pinkerton detective. I don't wait for men to make all the important decisions." She smiled. "So what's your answer?" He kissed her instead of answering, which was answer enough. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle. Not a storm this time, but a blessing. Because some negotiations took time. Some partnerships needed to be built slowly, with care and intention. And some wrong turns led to exactly the right destination, even if the path was nothing like what you'd planned. Outside Montana Territory spread vast and unforgiving and beautiful, full of people who needed help, full of crimes that needed solving, full of possibilities for a detective who'd learned that staying could be just as courageous as leaving. Lucy Ann Pemberton, formerly of the Boston Pinkertons, now of Twin Pines, Montana Territory, returned to her case files. But she did so with a smile. Because for the first time in her 28 years, she wasn't just solving other people's problems. She was building her own life. And that she was discovering was the greatest case she'd ever taken. The wrong bride had come to the right place, and everything that followed was exactly as it should be. The end.